Hello, chess friends. This is International Master Valeri Lilov, and welcome to today's lecture on YouTube. I must apologize for the condition of my voice. I had another cold in the last week. Anyway, I do hope you can tolerate me for a little while. It's not going to take too long. It's just going to be for 1 hour. Today, I'd like to talk about a very interesting topic, which is really the topic of, uh, you know, exchange sacrifices. Now, as many of you probably have heard, exchange sacrifices are really not that simple or easy. And one of the reasons is because usually there's no checkmate. Like, if you're expecting, okay, maybe I can see a checkmate going on, you're not, or not likely going to. So, how do you make an exchange sacrifice really work out? And in general, how do we know what type of sacrifice we should fight for, we should be making? Is really what I'm going to try and talk about today. So I'm going to start with a couple of really instructive master games that basically relate to that subject in an incredible way. They're all from Grandmaster Grivas's course on Advanced Chess School, where he basically shows a lot of different techniques about attacking, sacrifices, and many others through the eyes of great masters and champions of all those years. So I'm going to begin with one of these games. It was actually a fantastic game played by Paul Keres himself. So give me 1 second. I'm going to open it up here. So, okay, give me a moment. I'm going to have to copy the game, set it into training mode, and actually... Okay. So this game was played by Keres himself and a very strong grandmaster named Sabo. So let me show this to you, and we're going to use this as a training because I'm going to ask a couple questions, very important questions. Basically, the game started with e4, c5, knight f3, d6. So this is pretty much the usual, the normal line of Sicilian. And so after the move of d6, of course, white played with d4, exchange recapture. I mean, there's nothing so special out there. It's all about the move of d4, c takes to the d, knight takes to the d, and after knight takes to the d, knight f6, white played the move of knight of the c3, which is about just completing the development. So we're going to go through the opening rather quickly because there's nothing special. Well, it's just developing actively. As with every attacking position, before you actually get those attacking possibilities, you need to get a solid development, like a really good development, in order to have these possibilities, a fundament, in order to make your attack work. So this is exactly what white is doing, and that's beautiful out there. So actually, after continuing with the move of queen to the d2, then black played with the move of bishop to d7, alongside castles. So everything feels more or less fine at the moment. And then after that, of course, next move, white actually chose black played kingside castles, and white played f4. So this is really just the way on how it's going. So we're having this easy setup, the variation in which white basically brings out his pawns and pieces towards the center, the active development. I mean, it's all set up to work. It all feels good. Now, of course, the big question is, how do we do more? How do we actually get to use this to our advantage? And here is how. After that last move, black played a6. So now this is where it comes my first question to you guys, which is really, okay, what is white supposed to do right now? It's a very huge question, I think, but it's really, really important. So let's think a little bit about that, and let's try to figure out what are the possibilities. I mean, the first thing that we see is that there is a beautiful center. Unfortunately, of course, we cannot use that. So we can see that the f4 and e4 are good. The knight actually stands out pretty strong. The pieces are great, but there's nothing immediate, nothing that major. So the first thing that Keres had in mind is, okay, I do have the space, I do have the center, I do stay well currently with each of my forces. That's wonderful. But if I'm going to do something, I have to play a lot more actively, a lot more direct. So there came the move e5. Now, let me tell you the truth. A move like e5 is supposed to be very carefully calculated. You can't just jump in with that type of move. This is too committal. And if we actually play that kind of move with practically no preparation, we could lose the game quickly. But there's a very easy way when you're calculating, when you're analyzing, to decide if a move of that kind is actually good or not. And what is that? Basically, the idea is this. If you look at a move like e5, breakthrough, and you think about this, okay, so it's going to leave me with that kind of weakness, and this type of thing is going to risk the position, but it doesn't bring you any initiative or any pressure as of that matter, then you don't want to do it. In this case, white calculated that after d takes to the e, at the very least, black can capture, and very quickly after that, he can take back on the e5, making it quite significant to attack f6 and e7. Maybe first queen takes d8, and black plays b takes to the c. So Paul Keres' idea of e5 was really just to use the perfect preparation and development in order to dominate black at this very early stage. It was really good. Black had to take. He didn't have really much of a choice. And then after the take, there was knight x to the c6. Wonderful. Of course, black plays b takes to the c. Otherwise, if he exchanged the queen, the e7 bishop would have been hanging. But then white plays f takes d. Now take a look at that. It's really all about the development of white versus the development of black. So it's like white has a great center, and then black has backward pieces. It's always the preparation. When there's a collision between your pieces and the opponent's, the only thing that matters isn't calculation, isn't like, I'm going to do this, he's going to do that. It matters just looking around and saying, okay, do I feel like I'm better developed, or does he feel like he's better developed? And if you look at this, white's got like, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, not counting the pawn, although we should count it because it's an attacker. So 5 pieces. Black's got, what, like 2? 2 pieces? It doesn't work. See, so 5 versus 2. We have more than enough power to suspect and believe that this challenge is going to be well preserved and utilized. And then after f takes to the e, as black came back with his knight, moving to the d7 square, then surely white decided, okay, let's do the h4 move. And in case black plays bishop takes g5, there's going to be h takes to the g. Then we can play a move like bishop to the d3. And we can actually have the h7, which is pretty wonderful, actually. It's good. Remember, every time when you're attacking, the first thing that you would like to rely on is the ability to keep pressure. That means hold your opponent's pieces tied down. Because if they're kept backward, if they're tied more down, then you cannot be able to do anything too much. And so after h4, black played rook b8. And that didn't matter because white continued with queen e3. It's interesting to see the balance here. Any attack, whether you sacrifice or not, must be developed through balancing the attacking, the forcing, threatening moves we do with the kinds of moves that simply help us to strengthen the position and get more, activity. So after queen e3, black plays rook to the e8. And this was a great moment for white to play rook h3. And so this is actually helping him to get rook g3. See, we use the current position, the momentum that white has presently built for himself in order to get a lot more. And this seemingly works. It's like a good game. Queen a5, apparently hoping to use the queen, maybe go to the b4 and keep some extra tension against b2. And it didn't matter because white plays bishop takes to the e7. Then there's rook takes to the e7. And then, of course, white just plays rook g3. So you can see it's not about do you have good pieces, do we have bad pieces. It's about that preparation and the fact that white feels like everything is complete now. The tension is great. E5 can't fall due to the back rank checkmate. It's all in there. It all feels good. Now, there's no sacrifice, and I know that I can see you actually thinking, okay, Valeri, this is not on topic. But it is, because you see, sacrifice does not happen that fast. It takes quite some time before we build to the potential, to the position where a sacrifice could work. Now, I'm not saying that when there's going to be a sacrifice, but I want you to think right here. So we have already got the development right. We have set the rook, the pawn. Black's down behind, and his space is limited, which is definitely a factor to tell us that white is dominating. But, but, what should white try to do in this position? What's the best way to go for him? Is there any breakthrough? Any really good point with which we could attack? Anything. Just take a moment and think about that yourself. Now, bishop d3, queen h6. I like both. I like all of these moves. Yeah. I like bishop d3 because it actually lines up h7. It doesn't make a threat, but it's a useful move, and we can certainly use it. I like also queen h6 because it applies pressure against the g7, so that also wouldn't be bad. You know, it's all good. What Keres played was rook takes d7, and wow, that was a bashing move. Now, why did we do it like this? I mean, see, it's a kind of impressive move at first sight, but why? You know, in both cases, with queen h6 and bishop d3, black would have only just one response: queen takes e5. And not only that, he would turn a very valuable piece, his queen, into the attack, into the defense that he really needed, but also we would lose a really valuable, pawn. It's like this pawn was what was actually keeping white's position so strong. And suddenly, once it's lost, it's all gone. It doesn't work no more. See, this is like, I don't think white really wanted that. What white was looking for, he was actually thinking about a way to keep it. The only way to keep up the pressure, the only way to allow this position to stand and continue being more powerful was basically by playing the move of rook takes d7. Now, the e5 pawn can actually hold itself there, so there's no danger. And yet, after rook takes to the d7 and bishop takes to the d7, white can play bishop d3 and maintain the power of his attack. With the bishop going on the line, we have the threat, because it's gonna definitely follow up against the opponent's king. And then we also realize that it's not just the h7, but it's also the g7, and it is all those great moves. It's fantastic, really good, and really efficient. And so what's happening right now, I mean, when this move is played, not too much. If you really think about this, the problem is that he doesn't have any way to go, like, basically anywhere. So what is amazing is that after bishop d3, h6, right, plays queen f4. And now take a look at this. Every exchange sacrifice, or what I would call often a positional sacrifice, must be treated in this exact way. What is it about? Well, it's really just about one thing: making sure we keep the opponent backside. Now remember, it is not about thinking about the check for a checkmate or a huge breakthrough that will help us to win the position. It's not about that. It is all about, can you create more pressure or more challenge so that your attack can continue and grow through all the times. That is basically everything we're looking to do. And that is really the reason why white is being so successful. It is the key. So no matter what is going on, always think about this. Do I have enough pressure? If you do, then it is perfect. You don't have to worry. And it is an amazing move because the reality is that after queen to f4, black runs out with his king. Of course he does, running away. And then once he gets to run away, white plays rook takes g7. Another fascinating move that basically busts open black's whole position out there. And it's just amazing. I mean, really, if you look at this, you understand the impossibility for black. I mean, like now, even if he gets to capture with his king on the g7, we're going to have moves like queen f6. We're going to have so much more. Bringing the idea that there are literally no pieces or very few pieces down there to help him, it's exactly what white wants and what he needs. So the attack just continues and it grows into something incredible. Let's have a look. After rook takes g7, apparently black plays king takes g7, queen f6 check. Take a look at this. Just see how white is developing. And it's like, it's not just one or two nice moves. It's all of this happening at the same time. It's amazing. So check. Apparently black was in trouble. Couldn't do much. He actually picked up to escape, but then white plays bishop g6. Now we can see that black is material up. Who cares? Think about that. He is material up, and nobody cares. Because the reality is that it wouldn't matter. Like in whatever way we actually play it, it wouldn't make any difference. So that's quite amazing, quite beautiful. If the bishop takes bishop to the g6, black played black can play rook e7, and there's a checkmate, and there's nothing. He basically lost it. A pretty incredible example and a pretty incredible way on how white really delivered everything in this game was we see with the steps. Step 1, develop and control the center. Very simple. Step 2, make sure that you use that development to engage something that you feel is right. White did it so beautifully, and it worked. And more importantly, remember that whether you sacrifice or not, I mean, generally the idea is try to do it without having to sacrifice. But even if you have to sacrifice, even if you do need to do it this way, don't forget that the most important thing is to constantly keep the pressure on your opponent. If you can do it this way, then things are going to be great. So that is what really worked out so good. With the idea of pawn up to the e5 and all these exchanges, it's like white didn't want to commit. He didn't want to sacrifice. He didn't want to do anything that could have undermined his actual position. But it's really, really important. So everything was under pressure, and black was behind. The most valuable is rook takes to the d7. We see white was ready to give away the rook just so that the tension and the pressure could continue. Now that's what I call the power of a great sacrifice. Now I want to show you another game that was actually played by Ulf Andersson. Now Ulf Andersson was an incredible player who used a lot of different defensive sacrifices. So I'm going to show you how that works. But before that, I do want to suggest you to take a look at the link below this video. Grandmaster Grivas, one of the best teachers in the world. He's an official FIDE trainer and FIDE instructor. He trains the trainers. He's an incredible chess player and a coach. He's prepared an over 15-hour course that's actually being offered by iChess for 50% discount only for the next few hours. So it's called the Grivas method. You're gonna really love the suggestions that he gives about studying games and about different techniques that we can practice and apply in a complete program for training. And these games are just a couple of examples from the actual course by the Grandmaster and how much there is to learn. The next game I want to share with you, it was, yes, played by Ulf Andersson himself, and his opponent was Rivas, Pastor Rivas. So c4, knight f3, d4 and bishop g5. I mean, the opening is very similar to what we saw in the previous game. The idea being, white is doing great. It's actually getting to develop, and it's quite good. It's all really just excellent at the moment. No complication. It's all excellent. And yeah, so what's going on next move? After the move of bishop to the g5 as it was, basically black played with bishop to the e7. And then after the move of bishop to the e7, surely the idea was next move, don't have to worry. You can just continue with the move of e3 here and knight c3. Simple development. Everything is good. And we're just setting everything in place. So remember, a key thing about these games is it all starts slowly. People don't get that. That's true. But it's all supposed to begin in a kind of a slow, consistent manner, just like gradually turning our pieces and getting everything in place. And that's great. If we can do this, awesome. That's how we should be doing it. So after the move of, actually after continuing with this move of bishop to the h4, so next move, black played knight e4, bishop takes to the e7, was a decent candidate. And then surely after black played with the move of queen takes to the e7, white played rook to c1. So it all felt quite good. All right. So takes, black played with c6, and bishop d3. Now, again, this may sound boring to some people. This approach may sound boring. I'm telling you this because I know it from experience. But don't let that bore you. Don't let that bore you, because the truth is, if you actually get this type of setup, everything would work perfectly. And that's what we're doing at this moment. Setting things up, really getting everything together, and we've got a lot more that we could set. So let's take a look. Next move, actually, very interesting. It's white is doing it beautiful. Black plays knight next to the c3, capture, takes, and then rook takes the c4. So we can see that there are certain general specifics of any successful attack, and one of them is always the command in the middle. As you can realize in this position, white cares about that tremendously, because nothing's going to work. Truth is, nothing really is going to work out unless we get that type of development, unless we get that type of support and control. So with this, we have the castles, e4, e5, queen d2, plus queen to the f4. Yes, maybe slow, may take time, but it's okay. It's not going to take too long. We're going to get what is necessary to make the attack work. And after that, okay, so just basically what happened in this position is that black played with knight to the d7, and white plays with short castle. It was very good. And so, for instance, after that move here, black plays e5. So what is this about? Apparently the idea is very clear. Black just wants to open up and do something. Open, break, attack, whatever it is. It makes a lot of sense. So what's white supposed to continue with, given this position? Okay, the first thing that you have to realize is that you don't want to do anything special. Wait until he breaks and then open up, because you're better and more ready than he is ever going to be. It's exactly what white did. White didn't want to do anything special. He just waited until black breaks, and now we confront him. But okay, well, what kind of attack are we going to get here? Don't force the position. Give yourself some time. Remember that the pieces are going to make the attack. The sacrifice is going to come when you're ready. And that's fine. Actually, this is very, very important. So Of course, after continuing with the move, rook e4, black plays knight instead of f3 queen, bishop to the e6. And so that's very, very important. Like, what do we do right now? So, good position. And, white has a strong looking rook, a wonderful bishop, good pieces. Overall, this is a really the kind of position that we want. But what's next? Does anybody have a suggestion? Now, I'm curious. What should white do now? Do we attack with the bishop? Do we try to get the other rook? Do we have time to do that? Or do we want to do something else? It's a great question. The first thing that we want to do in such kind of position is think about what's the problem. I love thinking about problems. Most people don't. Most people would actually think about anything else, but not a problem of the position. Who like to think about problems? Most people don't. But truth is, actually, after that type of a move, so is what we could consider is playing with the move of, bishop c4. It's a nice pin that we're doing. We have the possibility to challenge the opponent's bishop now. And you can see that the first thing before any significant attack to start out is the ability to pressure and create weaknesses. Now remember those two things. You can't attack if you don't create a weakness. So what we have in this position is the idea for white to exchange e6, move its queen onto the g4, and ultimately exercise pressure on e6. Now this is how we start. There's going to be more weaknesses coming out of this one, but yes, that's what we're going for. Now, after continuing with bishop to c4, black played rook d8, exchange takes, and queen e2. An amazing move. Nobody would do this. Just this kind of move is usually even again bad in my standards, because this looks like a terrible backward move. Who wouldn't put his queen in g4? The idea is that when you get an advantage of any kind, whether it's through an attack or sacrifice or whatever, usually what you want to do is to start thinking about, restricting the opponent big time. Now, this is not easy, but that's how you'd like to do it. And when you restrict the opponent, things go well. There's no sacrifice here, but we do it slowly. Here, queen c4, king h8, h3. Now, basically, black plays with the e5 move. Now, I would like to hear if anyone could give me a suggestion on what white should do. It's a perfect looking position. Everything looks fantastic, fascinating. So, what do you think white's got to do right now? Anyone? Now, f4 move. Absolutely. That's the way to go. You see, it's a very, very interesting way to go because, like, when we have f4, we can exercise a great pressure against the e6. We can think about also the rook moving towards the f3, and we do it all in the right way. Remember, pressure can go a long way as long as you keep working towards your pieces. You see, this is a thematic game. Everything is about the pieces. It's all about it from the very start to the very finish. And you can see how Anderson really made it work so that it's not about anything else. Black also has active pieces, but as you can see, those pieces of his cannot do anything. The queen on the d6 isn't helpful. The rook and our queen can move around, probably advance, while blacks are rather empty. And yet, black isn't that worse. I mean, you play rook d2, rook f2, of course. We can't let the opponent's active pieces out there. Queen f6, queen c5, b6, queen e3. And actually, after that, black played queen d6, rook to the f3. And you see, remember one thing about this. If you ever have a problem with pieces, group them. The black pieces are also good looking, but they're not grouped. They're not really coordinated in some way. What white is going to do is that he's going to actually find a way to manage his pieces very well. And so that's why black actually wanted to exchange the queens. And yet, white just proves to be more powerful. He can do a move like rook e7, rook d4, rook g3. That ties him down. And now we have a winning endgame simply due to the pieces and everything else. So now we have that idea, okay, of playing f6. We've got rook to the g6 out there. It's all wonderful. Rook f4, and then ultimately we got rook f7. So, for example, after playing with that type of move, and then we have this, you've got the opportunity to advance, maybe even with a move like rook to the g6, and g7 is great to advance. H6 will be good to attack against, and you see, the domination is always by advanced pieces against the opponent versus passive backward pieces. So that is a really, really good way to go forward. So what happens next? Well, keep looking. Look at the rook on f4, working alone, doing nothing. And look at the white rook on the c6 that's pressuring. Look at the black rook on the g8 that's doing nothing. And again, look at white's own force. It's like white is already having everything in place. That's what it's really about. Pressure, challenge, and keeping the opponent backward in every way. And so what we are seeing is the idea to just keep it up. Black plays rook f2, and now what we have is a4, rook f4, king g3, rook a7, rook takes a5. You see, Anderson's opponent really tried literally everything in order to complicate and make his game go well. He did try everything. But it doesn't matter because the reality is those kinds of moves just have practically no impact. And so take a look. This move, rook c7, rook b5. I always say it, you can never learn an endgame. But there are what I would call guidelines in an endgame. And if you follow the right guidelines, you can be very successful. First guideline, make yourself more active. Second guideline, consider creating passed pawn or pawns. White's got the two rooks that are pretty amazing at that point, and now he's got the a5 as a passer. So these two are great. a5, rook c5, now f6, rook takes h. You see, this game is really showing you the most important function of the pieces, to connect, to be together in the purest form. Nothing else. Here, and then actually we have rook c7, rook b3. You see, what I was just doing was to keep black down, keep him backward for as long as possible. And now he kind of stands backward and tries to do something. White simply uses to continue the challenge of the pieces. So we've got a serious trouble for black. The rook takes to the c3 will be an easy way to plan. And so this is very, very good. So in fact, this is a great example in this case. One of the keys, look, especially for winning in such a position, is start with the opening. Again, simple. And then bring your pieces together. When you do that, you have practically the opening, in the early middle game completed successfully. What you're left with is what I would call the late middle game, where you must think not so much about an attack, but you must be thinking about a way to create a weakness. Now remember that very carefully because it's going to be a huge deal. How do I get to create a weakness? You can make one, then you're on your way to taking the pressure. This means tying the opponent down or constantly making him to worry because, either his pieces are not going to be as strong or he'd always have to connect to protecting. There's one more weakness there, which was the G7 that white intended to attack. I know that this is a complex example like this, but it really, in its very core, it's something very simple. As long as you're strict to follow these principles, that could work out well. Now, another interesting example I'd like to bring up was actually played by Mihail Botvinnik. In fact, Botvinnik himself was great at using peace power, and he was brilliant about using it when it comes to sacrifice. We saw a sacrifice example of activity, and we also saw like an example of, the one that we just saw right now, with a quiet example. But I want to show you another one. But Finney's next game was perfect. I want to show you what he was able to do and deliver. So hold on. Open it. Okay, I'll listen to 1 second. And then we're going to talk about this game is played between Lubinsky versus Botvinnik, one of the most incredible classical games. And then we're going to look at it as from black side. So first thing that what the black did was to command the center and follow with the development. Phoenix to the Sea is not considered very good. This is the kind of move that you would usually not want to be making unless there's something special. There isn't anything special, but anyway, black just takes with that. After this, white plays knight c3, d6, d4, knight d7, exchange, and bishop to the d6. So after black played the move of bishop to the d6, everything works out fine. Knight e2, castle, knight g3, b8. See, what is good here is that there's no risk. Opening is the quiet stage of the game, in which if you look at almost all the great masters of the past, basically they want to use that time to really build up their positions without actually risking or doing anything that could put their position at risk. So with this move of rook to the b8, everything works out great. Now, white plays b3 and bishop e3. I know that we get to a stage where a lot of people are wondering, okay, what do I do now? I mean, I have a good development, I have a structure of some kind, so what do I do now? I want to ask you for your questions here because this is a good question, a good query is here. What should black do? Give me your thoughts, even if they're not correct. That's fine. I like to know what you think so I can give you my feedback or suggestions on what I think is right or not. Take a second and let's see what you've got. While you do this, just want to suggest you once again, you can take a look at the link below the lecture, below the video. It provides an incredible discount of a fantastic course called the Advanced Chess School by Grandmaster Grivas. It's only available for a few hours, and it is a fantastic sequence of just different principles, different rules, and the way they can apply in different games. So let's see But going back to this game, what was black's main strategy? Knight f8, g6, f4. G6, but not the knight. It wasn't bishop b4 either. First thing, we want to keep the flexibility. Let's make sure that what we do in this type of position is we ultimately take the time and bring our pieces close. But first of all, we have to be controlling the opponent. So can move up, he can go out, and then after that, white plays c3. And now what we do is we're actually just limiting the opponent. He can play with the move of pawn up to the b4, queen c2, queen e7, rook d1, and then, for example, after that, black played with the move of knight to the c5. We get a nice opportunity to restrict the opponent, and now we're taking the time to regroup our pieces. The knight comes up to the e6. We're getting ready to also advance it towards the f4. Very useful. And again, we do it slowly. You gotta understand, sacrifices do not come until much later. Sometimes they don't come at all, like in the previous game. We don't even do it. So this is very important. But then after the move of knight d3, black plays knight f4. He just basically improved his pieces. He went on. So, and then, for example, if black exchanges, there's going to be the recapture. So things look terrific. f3. And so after the move of pawn up to the f3, black plays bishop a6. It's interesting how every bad piece, like including the bad knight on the d7 and the bad knight bishop on c8, they suddenly turn out into something good. Now this creates the circumstance so that you could eventually attack against him later. Not yet, but later. This is very, very important. Now, let's take a look and see what happened in the game. After the move, white basically played c4. Black plays c5. And you can also get to see how we also create the formation that limits the opponent, which is something incredibly valuable at this point. We've got the d4 square, and then we can actually see that there is a chance to move the rooks up to d8, and maybe we can think about controlling that or operating on that line. But now the majority of white's pieces are being fairly limited right now. So that's how we're just doing it right now, step by step. Queen d2. I'd like to know if anybody has a suggestion on what black has to go for now. We're going forward with the attack, but we're not ready, or at least not fully ready yet. So what to do now? I mean, brilliant knight, great post. Yeah, we have great posts, as you mentioned, with the knight on f4. That's really cool. But what do we do? Now the move was knight takes d3. Now somebody would be like, crazy. Did you, Valeri? Just we improved that knight for so many moves. Why the hell do we exchange them? Keep in mind this. You don't want to allow any risks. If you look at the games of Carlsen, I believe one of his major secrets is that he does not allow any risks. The knight on d3 attacking c5 or f4 is a liability. Do not allow any liability. c5 was restrictive. That's why black did it. That's why he actually went on. And now, after this is done, and of course, white played with queen takes d3, rook d8, knight f1, sorry, knight e2, black plays c6. Bishop comes back. And now, but Finnick had to face an important situation. The white knight was coming on a4. He was going to attack here, maybe even attack here. So the truth is we have two more liabilities that are not so easy to cover. It's really tricky here. We don't have an easy version of breaking through or opening, and it's tricky. So does anybody have any suggestion as to where or what black could try right now, because it does not look good. No, it does not. So what should we do? What are we going for? Anyone? Hmm. Well, the thing about this is, yes, rook d4, positional sacrifice. One that helps black to actually move through inside white's territory and create different type of threats. And so what we find out is that the moment white would actually capture the rook on the d4, black could simply take back with edicts to the d, or even cedicts to the d. And the truth is, white couldn't allow that pawn. He didn't care about his rook on the a1 out there. But the reality is, it's all about our pieces moving forward. And again, we regroup. The biggest deal of any positional play is to constantly think about regrouping your pieces. That means take up certain piece and then move it here. Then you can regroup it to that place, to this position. And then little by little, I mean, this rook was just pain in the white's eyes. He couldn't really think about anything different. But so what you could do in this position, what white should have done was most likely keep it, but he saw f5 coming. He saw the queen going. He saw the two bishops and probably even the other rook. And so actually, after continuing with this type of move, black was already like going on his way to win the game. So white felt, okay, I'm the only way for me to go ahead with. So is just to fling maybe a move like knight takes to the d4, c takes to the d, bishop f2, and then there is a c5. And so actually now we have also the move of pawn up to the f5, and so it's a really, really good idea. Step by step, things are wonderful, and ultimately we realized that black could actually continue with a move like f5, bishop b6, bishop b7, rook f8. Now think about this. Every piece has its own relative value. I've said it many times, but the biggest problem is that most people have problem figuring out what the relative value is. Now that's intuitive, but I think that it also depends very much on what the piece or the pieces are doing. Okay, so if you think about the rook on a1, how much do you think this rook is worth it? What, like 40%, 30, 20, 15? I'd say 10, because it's really just one of those worst placed pieces. It has practically no value, virtually zero possibilities, being there. And it's bad. The key is to think about this. These pieces are going to be horrible. And as black played along with the move of f5, bishop g3, and bishop d7, we can also see that black's rook is coming from the f to reach down, from b8 to reach down f8. We've got moves like bishop c6, queen g5, extra pressure over the f file, and a lot of different resources. This is quite interesting. So this is really, really important. Now, what happened is that white played the move of rook to the d1, f4. Now we see the bishop is much stronger than the rook, because practically any opportunity for the white rook or rooks to turn into something else are practically useless. There's nothing that they can do, nothing that they will deliver. So let's see. This, bishop f2, g5, turning into g4. That's what sets it up. White plays g4 himself. He can't allow that. Black plays f takes g. It's like black is not material down. You got to understand that. I'm not suggesting you, I'm not asking you to just let material go like this. No, protect your material. But think about it. There is a way to make a bishop better than a rook. There is a way to make sometimes a knight better than a queen. There are many ways. Your initial goal, however, is to focus on the value of the piece. What can it do? Where will it go? If you think about it, it makes all the difference in the world. And the reality is that after f takes g, bishop takes the g, and then bishop h3, as black continues advancing his own pawns and white stands back, position grows incredibly fast. Rook f8, rook d3, and rook f4. Look at that pressure. Literally every single one of white's pieces now has nothing else to do but to sit back and defend. And it's awful. So what are we doing here? We're just keeping him more behind. King h1, king h7. Now, another question I've gotten too many times about sacrifices, Valeri, explain to me time. Now, how do I know if I'm fast enough or if I'm not just going too quickly? I mean, just like, or too slowly. How do I know? Truth is, there's only one way. It has nothing to do with calculation, and it has everything to do with asking the following question. What can my opponent do to counter me or to damage me? If you don't believe your opponent has got nothing to do to damage you or counter you successfully, you've got the time. It doesn't matter what the variation is or the position or the sacrifice or the risk. Time is only determined by your opponent's ability to pose threats, to create problems. If there is no way on how you can make problems or threats, you've got the time. That's especially important if you want to make a positional sacrifice, because then that's the only thing that will prove whether your sacrifice is right or not. And so, let's take a look. After that last move, essentially, white was feeling a little off. Rook g1, then here, then queen e2, queen to the f7. And then, so this is really dangerous. We've got the power of the bishop. We've got the incredible tension on the f3. And we just keep going. Queen d1, queen h5. Queen takes f3. That's what we call it positional sacrifice. Exchange sacrifice often, means positional sacrifice. It doesn't mean that it necessarily means just knight, rook for knight. Sometimes we do it to tactically kill him, but we usually don't. What we usually do is we want to just, okay, let's keep him under pressure. And as we do, that's going to just help us to grow more and do things the way they need to be done. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Takes, take, capture. And then after that move, of course, in case of bishop takes g, the rook was actually taken, which was wonderful. He's basically losing it because of the incredible problem out there. And we've got it. Remember that type of possibility, to pressurize the opponent, to keep him on the downside, and that's wonderful. The secret being is always pressure, good pieces, and continuous ability to attack him. Not a quick ability to attack him, but continuous ability to do that. And that was wonderful, because then obviously white has a trouble. d3 is coming up. We got this pawn going, two of them. Couldn't stop. So what really helped Botvinnik within this game is, the first thing that you need to understand about every opening is the center. The center is your pillar. If you don't have a pillar, you're going to have problems. The pillar was the middle for black. Everything else did not need to be as perfect, but the center was there. Second, the early middle game. It all started with maneuvering and setting up, really getting those pieces a little bit better. And this happened very well as black took the time to both restrict the opponent's pieces and improve his own. And then finally we get to this later stage where we have already some special circumstances, and we actually give away a rook for a bishop just so we can get those lines in play. Positionally, this is very interesting because we care about long-term possibilities. We care not just about one single tactic, but how can we constantly grow our position by making more and further pressure against our opponent. And that's basically very strong, really interesting, very effective, and it worked out. So those are just the things that I wanted to share with you guys about like how to think in terms of a good position, of a good plan, and more importantly, how to think about sacrifices, because it always takes some time to figure it out correctly, and it's never too easy. So I'm glad that we actually got to talk about all these concepts and suggestions right now. And if for those of you who have any questions, again, just take a look at this like link below the video, which is with a perfect like a brilliant course by Grandmaster Grivas, 15 hours. It's only available for a few hours at this 50% discount. You might want to check it out. And again, I would like to thank you all for joining me tonight. I apologize once again for my voice. I had a little bit of a cold. I will be actually doing better next week. So thank you all, and I'll speak to you next Saturday.